I would like to call to order the Westford Planning Board meeting of Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. We have with us this evening 4 members of the Planning Board. Darren Wiest is absent this evening, and Bob Schaffer is remote once again in Qatar, so we will be taking all of our votes via roll call this evening. We also have Joe Gianowitz, Town Planner, working the phones to get some of our applicants on the line to participate this evening. As well as some members of the public who are interested in making some comments maybe this evening. So, as always, we will start with open forum. Does anybody on the board have any items for open forum?
Mr. Chair, I just want to, at the last meeting, I had said I would reach out to the Pedestrian Safety Committee about looking at the preliminary design for the sidewalk on Nutting Road, and I did contact the chair. He said that it would be impossible to get a meeting in April, so he spoke with the town planner, and they decided that because it's really the town's responsibility to do stuff, easements and such, that might as well just hold off until it gets closer to potential reality, and then have a meeting with the abutters. So,
oh, great.
So we just.
And so we can have engineering report back any comments they had to the applicant. They can make any final changes, and then we'll have those plans on record.
And,
so
great, and then we can release them from the obligation and allow them to proceed with their project.
Yep.
Correct.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for reaching out and having that discussion with the Pedestrian Safety Committee.
Yep.
Bob, anything for open?
Can I just ask on that? So we
I do not have anything.
Engineering on that?
So engineering will review the basically 75% plans and provide any comments they have for any changes that they feel need to be made.
Okay.
And then we'll provide that to the applicant. They can make those changes, and then the town will have the AutoCAD files in case Pedestrian Safety Committee, abutters in the future ask for any changes, as well as those plans as they are to date, and then we can release the applicant. It seemed to be the wish of the board.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Bob, I'm sorry. You said you had nothing for open forum?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Joe, anything for open forum?
Nothing.
No? Great. Anybody from the public have any items that they'd like to bring to the floor for open forum? All right. Seeing none, we will move on. Normally, we would jump into our public hearing items, but we do have an applicant with a general business topic who is on the phone right now. So we're going to go a little out of order. We're going to jump into general business, and we're going to tackle, this is topic B, right, Joe?
Correct.
Yep.
PB 2214 at 174 Littleton Road, a request to authorize administrative review and approval for a change of use from retail sales to the general public to business or professional office. Joe, do you want to give us some background before we go to the applicant?
Sure. I think everyone's familiar with this property, 174 Littleton Road. I believe this unit has been vacant for some time. I think there was even a Blockbuster in there at one point, if you can go back that far.
That was the last thing in there, right?
Yeah.
I think it was the last thing in there.
Oh no, they had
Blockbuster site, right?
they had a Halloween thing in there for a while.
They did do a Halloween thing in there, that's right. Okay, yep.
So JP Morgan Chase Bank is looking to occupy the space, and we have a representative here on the phone from their consultants looking to go ahead and get this project permitted.
Great. Okay, so is the applicant on the line? Can you hear us?
Yes, this is Coral Silsby from Project Expeditors for JP Morgan Chase. How are you all?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having us this evening.
Great. So if you can talk to us and walk us through a little bit about the project.
Sure. So the project's located at 174 Littleton Road. It proposes a change in use from retail sales to the general public to business or professional office use for a new tenancy of JP Morgan Chase Bank. The project proposes utilizing the existing on-site parking, which will actually reduce the number of required spaces from 1 per 180 square feet to 1 per 200 square feet. The bank will have approximately 8 employees. Business hours are 9 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to 12 on Saturday. There's an ATM proposed to be located in the lobby, which will have 24/7 access. And we're not anticipating any increase in traffic, and we look forward to being part of the community.
Great. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so I had one question, Joe. I don't know if this is, if this is for the applicant or whether this is actually for the property owner, but I noticed that they're not proposing to take the entirety of the space, but all of the frontage of the space will be taken. Do we have any feedback on what would become of that unused portion towards the back? Is that usable? Is the landlord gonna just use that as storage or something for the overall facility?
I have not heard what's going to happen with that additional space. We
Yeah.
could certainly reach out to the property owner and see what their intentions are.
I just don't know if they could do anything really with it, since it doesn't have like a storefront. So I don't know whether anything can be done with that space. I'm just trying to think about it in terms of parking. Could there be any use that's allowed in that spot, and do we need to think about
It
that?
goes to a butter, but I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Great, well, thank you for the background. Let's go to the board. Bob, did you have any comments on 174 Littleton Road with regard to an administrative change in use?
Yeah, I actually had two. I want to follow up on what you were just pursuing. My concern is about that unused space and how it's going to be monitored for fire and safety. It looks like it's not very accessible. It won't be viewable anymore from the front windows. So I guess that's my only concern, is that space is contained and is going to have to be monitored in some fashion. I don't know if we have any comments on that. That might have to go to the landlord.
Yeah, I mean, it's a landlord thing, but that's also like that's the building permitting purview, right? Not really ours.
Correct, right. The building commissioner and fire would review
Yeah.
during the building permit stage to make sure, any sort of fire separation was accommodated.
Yep.
For what would otherwise be unoccupied space up until it is occupied, or
Yep.
it's just kept as storage.
Okay. Okay, so your first point's on the record, Bob. What's the second point?
And then the other point I would carry forth with that, just make a note, is because of the way they've configured it, it's left with only one means of egress in that extra space.
Yep.
So,
Right.
the only other thing I wanted to pursue, I got part of the answer during the applicant's presentation, but I wanted to understand not just the density of the parking spaces, how many parking spaces in all are determined to be associated with this space?
This is the applicant speaking. This is Coral. I think that's a good question, and I can't give you that answer because I don't have the original site plan approval when spaces were allocated. I can only tell you that for the square footage, there's a reduction in the parking space requirements.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. What I was surprised by when I heard your presentation was the number of employees. And I think the number of employees far exceeds what I recall being the number of employees at the site in its previous use. So just want to make sure we pay attention to that, Bill and Joe.
Yeah.
Sure, and that number of employees is the total number of employees for the space, so they do have different shifts.
Yep.
So it wouldn't necessarily be 8 employees in the space at one time, probably 4 to 5. But the total number of employed, a lot of times jurisdictions ask how many employees we'll have, it will be somewhere around 8.
Yeah, and I think it's a big deal. I just want to make sure we pay due diligence to this with respect to the rest of the property. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Bob. Kate?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the overview. I did get confused by all the drawings, like the east and the north and the, south or no north, because the property isn't due east and west, so I wasn't sure really what facade was what. But, and also with the plans, it looked as though there was going to be something on the outside on the sidewall facing the Whole Foods. And there were also parking spaces there. I was just wondering if the employees would be using the parking spaces, how they would access the parking spaces. So to me, that would be something to consider. And I also wasn't sure what the little bump out thing was, if that was something that needed to be considered.
So this particular proposal does not propose any changes to the existing facade. We're not adding, the plans that are shown were meant to show existing conditions with no change at all.
Okay, so I just asked staff to look at that, like on the existing plans, there's what this little thing there is, other than that.
There's a structure kind of listed
Yeah.
here.
Oh, that thing.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure what that is, but.
so that's it, you know, I think it's pretty simple. Like you said, the number of parking spaces isn't increased or anything like that.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Kate. Mike?
Oh, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, my primary question had to do with the space in the back. So, I mean, I guess, you know, look, I mean, I don't want to jump to the conclusion before we take the vote, but I guess, you know, we'll put forward the motion to approve administrative review and approval for this change in use. I mean, I think the two things that have kind of come out here is, you know, obviously making sure the building commissioner is aware of that unoccupied space, the single point of egress for that unoccupied space, and I mean, we're making an assumption, I think, that that's not going to be occupied, given it only has one door that would open out to the back, so that wouldn't be
Right.
used. And we're not really, I mean, maybe it would be added, like you said, to an abutting property or something like that, and it would come before us maybe, or, and Bob's other point. Oh, no, Kate's point about the number of spaces, the total number of spaces, available, you know.
And if they're gonna use any in the side or the back, and
Right.
how to access.
So assuming that those things, we will assume that those things will be reviewed as part of administrative approval. Is there a motion then to approve administrative review and approval for a change in use for PB 2214 at 174 Littleton Road?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I say aye. Thank you very much to the applicant.
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time. Have a great night.
You as
Okay,
well.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will pivot back onto the standard agenda, or the proceedings as listed in the, on the agenda. So, we'll go to our public hearing items. The first public hearing item is PB 2201, site plan review at 5 Makepeace Road. The applicant has requested us to continue this item without discussion to the May 16th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to continue PB 2201 to the May 16th meeting here at Meeting Room 201 at Town Hall, 7 p.m.?
Moved.
Second?
Motion and a second to continue this item to May 16th. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike? Aye. And I say aye. The next public hearing item in front of us is a new item, PB 2211, site plan review and a special permit at 504 Groton Road.
We waive the public reading.
Second?
Motion and a second to waive the reading of the public hearing notice. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I say aye.
Move to open the public hearing,
Second.
Motion and a second to open PB
2211.
Thank you, 2211. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike? I say aye. Is the applicant with us? Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Matt Waterman with Land Tech Consultants. Also with me in the back of the room is Wendell Packard with WHP3 Realty Trust, the owner and applicant for the meeting. We're here tonight. The property is located at 504 Groton Road, which is located at the northeasterly corner of Oak Hill Road and Groton Road, Route 40. It's the intersection where they just did the lights and the improvements to the intersection, the gas station, the Lower 5 Bank. There's a neighborhood on the southeasterly corner, and then there's additional industrial buildings medical offices, contractors' yards surrounding the property to the north and east. We're here tonight for a site plan review. It's a 2,030 square foot addition to the northwest corner. If you're looking at the colored plan that's on the screen, the parking lot is on the right-hand side, shown in the light gray. The heavier orange color, or the mustard color, is the existing building with the hash marks. And then the addition is shown as the lighter orange color in the northwest corner of the building. The site plan review, we're here for 3 items. It's actually a site plan review for the building addition, special permit from 5.1.4, requesting the planning board to reduce the parking associated with the building addition, and then a special permit from 8.1.7.3.A, which is the Warpod section of the Water Resource Overlay Protection District, rendering more than 15% of the lot impervious. And we'll get into those in a minute. The property is 1 acres. It's zoned industrial A. The existing building is 9,800 square feet. It was built in 1986. It is mostly, excuse me, I lost my spot. Maintenance for machine shop. They're a distributor. They sell CNC machinery, machine-controlled equipment, such as lathes. They do not operate machinery in this building. It's not like a machine shop where people come and get custom-made parts and they produce it. They sell the machines that make the parts. So just like, almost like your office printer, they sell the printer, and then it breaks. They come to you, they fix it. And so you'll see, and I'm sure most of you have seen the building. There's typically not a lot of cars there. There's typically not a lot of activity. Most of their technicians are on the road. They're service technicians, and they're either making sales, performing maintenance, or getting a new machine up and running. So that's just a little bit of the background. The existing building, they've owned and operated this building for more than 40 years. It was built in 1986. They do not operate a machine shop. The proposed addition is simply additional warehouse space for additional inventory. It modifies an existing loading dock that was approved with the original site plan off of Oak Hill Road. That's currently not used. It sits kind of dormant, and they don't even use that access door or use it for parking or anything for that stretch. The addition takes up the portion that connects to the building, and then the addition would still have access with a garage door, but the loading space would just be shortened to about 60 feet, or about 40 feet, excuse me. The goal of the warehouse is to provide additional storage. Obviously, it's important with supply chain issues. They're looking forward a couple, 2-3 years. They want to make sure that they have the equipment on site. It's important to them that they have the space, and it's not used to increase the office space or the number of employees or anything like that. It's simply warehouse space. We are required, though, for the special permit for parking with the additional building square footage. It does trip or require additional parking. Ultimately, it's an additional 5 spaces. We've asked to green bank those spaces, and we provided a plan that shows how you could build those along Oak Hill Road. And I know there were some questions in the staff report about making that a one-way and kind of clarifying a few of the items with handicap spaces, and I think those are all things that we can do. But we would request that the planning board waive the 5 parking spaces associated with this square footage. Again, if you've ever driven by, the parking lot is rarely full. Typically, there's about 5 employees. It's mostly admin, office, and then a handful of the maintenance and technicians that are on the site occasionally. So they certainly don't use the 33 parking spaces, and we think that asking for the permit is warranted. Lastly, and I'll get into the special permit for the Warpod, we did include a drainage system that would account for the additional impervious area. And then with the sloping of the roof, we actually are picking up the westerly half of the building. So we would be infiltrating not only the proposed impervious, but half of the existing building, thinking that that would meet the performance standards that, I think is typically expected when you're in a war pod, and you're rendering more than 15%. Best management practices, as long as you're infiltrating, then you've met the standard, typically. Be happy to answer any questions. Wendell is here as well. He can answer any technical questions. And we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Joe, anything from town staff before we go to the board?
Nothing other than what's in the staff report currently. I think there are a few items to clarify based on the initial submission. And then engineering will provide their comments after the initial meeting tonight.
Yep.
And then from there, we'll see how things go.
Great. I just want to clarify that in the staff report, on page 1, under key dates, I just want to
Typo on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the dates are correct.
The dates are correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, let's go to the board. Who'd like to go first? Mike?
Sure.
I guess I'll go if you.
I just threw it to Mike. Can you go
Oh, okay.
next? Okay.
Mr. Waterman, I just have a question, and it's probably a little bit hypothetical. So if there were a change of use in this, and then you did have to put those additional parking spaces in, would that infiltration system be under the parking lot? Would that be affected?
It would, and I think it was noted in the staff report, we may have to jockey around one of the catch basins and show a modified swale and how that would work with the additional parking. And so the intent is that if you had to build the 5 additional spaces, the infiltration system is going to go in the southwest corner, closest to the intersection, in that open green space lawn area. And the parking will overlap that, and it was kind of noted that we should make sure that if the parking was to be built, that you could still accommodate the infiltration system. And we did review that, and we will be able to demonstrate how we could still provide the swale, and I think we'd end up reconnecting, if it is built, and moving a catch basin to the opposite side of the infiltration system. So we'll be able
They're there
to,
for another 40 years. I drive by there 10 times a day, and there isn't anybody there, and there's nobody on that loading dock side either, ever, so.
rarely.
But just in case, they do decide to move on, there is somebody else able to utilize that space.
And we're going to just provide additional clarification in that green bank exhibit, and we'll show the modification of moving one of the manholes. But we can certainly address that and make sure that that's shown.
Questions I had. Thank you, John.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Bob?
Yeah, the only, I did want to point out that I did speak with Joe earlier today, because not only in that key dates block on the first page, I checked to make sure the dates are correct, but it does have the incorrect special permit reference. So that probably should be fixed and committed to record, because it shows it as 2208 as opposed to 2211. So I'd make that point. The only question and comment I have is looking at the architectural diagrams we have. It looks like for the added space, the only 2 means of egress is a wide. I'm assuming it's now a wide open door back onto the showroom floor, and as well now a relocated overhead door system to the outside wall. And I was just wondering if town engineering had reviewed that, and I was questioning whether or not a emergency exit or some type that could be push bar operated is required for that space.
So a man door next to the loading door?
I'm just wondering, I noticed that wasn't shown, and that's typically what we see in these kind of spaces, but I didn't know if engineering had reviewed that or not.
I think he's right. I think you typically have that man door next to a larger garage overhead space, and that you can, and like he says, it has the emergency. We can certainly work and make sure that that's incorporated. I don't know if it gotten to that level of detail with the architecturals, but we can certainly make a note that it includes.
That's my only comment is adding that capability so that somebody can quickly exit that warehouse.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Any
That's
other Any other comments? That's it? Okay. Kate?
No, that's it.
I was just wondering, it was a bit unclear, because you are shortening the loading dock entrance driveway, so would the trucks be going all the way into the addition? Or would there just be a big door that they pull up to and it opens?
And currently, they load from the right-hand side. And I think the intent is that they would still load on that side.
What do you mean?
On the existing parking lot. So there's a loading door
Oh, there.
where that kind of white concrete ramp is, so there's an existing loading dock on the right-hand side. It's large, heavy equipment. The trucks will come up as close as they can, side load, and then they unload and bring it directly in.
But the driveway on Oak Hill Road, what will that be used for? Will that be used for anything?
I think for shorter trucks, but I don't think the intent is to load there. I'll have to defer to Wendell.
Yeah, see, we do not use the loading dock at all. In fact, when people back in, we tell them to pull around the side. We have a fork truck, we come in from the side, we drive everything in through the ramp on the right-hand side of the building. So the intent would be to keep the driveway on the left, but we won't be using it.
But there will be a door or something in the addition?
So the plan would
Should
be
probably come up to
the
the,
driveway, oh, sorry.
sorry,
Do you want to sit down?
since I'm asking
The plan
questions.
as it is right now would be garage door on the left-hand side on the addition, and then we'd probably do away with the actual loading dock and just make it drivable, if you will.
Okay, just wanted clarification, thank you.
Yeah.
And for Matt, I have a request, because I know there were comments about the plans. Because I actually look at the legend and try to find the things,
Every time.
and they don't match.
We can certainly go through and make sure that there's unless you
Like-
have something specific.
Well, like this line and that line,
Yep, we can clarify.
yeah.
A lot of that was some temporary easements, and they might even be permanent. When they did the improvements for the intersection, there was a lot of temporary and easements for sidewalks, so a lot of those lines are that, but we can certainly clarify.
And then it has like a chain link fence, but I didn't find it, but that's just
Yep,
that's a nit at this point. Yeah, and I did understand the setback lines. So that was my only nit.
Okay. Thanks, Kate. Have you come to agreement with town engineering as far as whether it's 48% impervious now or 52? I think you're saying it's going from 52 to 57.
I think that
and the
was-
staff
I think I
report seemed
took-
to say 48.
I took the open space when I double checked, so it's 52% open space, and I needed to take 100 minus 52 point,
Okay.
so that's a typo.
Okay.
The existing is the 47.2, or the 48.2 going to
57.
57.
Okay, so it is 48 to 57. All right, thanks. There, there's a drain or something that I think is in the driveway that I guess that'll get sealed as part of.
Yeah, it's an
putting in the-
existing leaching catch basin, so that loading dock is, as Wendell said, it drops down, and then you have a 4-foot raised bed, to access the building. That all gets raised, it gets pulled up, that catch basin gets removed, and that area drains into the new infiltration system.
Okay, great. Is the plan, if this is approved, there seems to be some questions regarding the striping in the parking area, so there can be like clear how many spaces
Yeah,
there
and I don't
are?
think we object to that, to striping the
No,
parking lot.
no.
I think it would certainly clarify it moving forward. It'll be a good kind of starting point.
Yep. Okay.
And we'll clarify the handicap ramp and provide the van accessible and those items.
Right. All right.
So there were a lot of comments in the staff report of things that needed to be done, so it sounds as though the applicant is working with you and with engineering, and so
Yep.
we really need at least another session.
Yes, yeah. Okay, So we'll see some updated information in our next meeting packet, whatever that is, yeah.
Hope so.
All right,
Definitely.
great. I didn't have any other further questions at this time. Is anybody in the audience here to ask questions or comment on PB 2211? No? Okay.
We continue this to the next?
Yeah, should we be continuing, what do we need for time here?
I think May 16th would be a good amount of time for engineering to be able to review, give comments. Any comments get addressed by the applicant, gives enough time to get revised materials in for your review.
Sure.
And
No,
hopefully
I
reach a
agree.
decision at that
Sounds
point.
like a good idea.
May 16th? Okay.
Yep.
Great.
I move that we continue PB 2211, 504 Broughton Road to meeting May 16th, 2022 at 7 o'clock in this meeting room unless otherwise publicized.
Second.
Motion and a second to continue to May 16th. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
I say aye. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
See you on the 16th. Okay. All right. That is the last of the public hearing items for this evening. We will move on to general business topics. The first general business topic is PB 2204, preliminary subdivision plan at 8 Flag Road. This is a continuation of a public conversation around an application from the Wilders regarding subdividing one lot into 2 lots and building a second house on their property. I guess we won't have anybody from the applicant side here this evening, if I recall the last meeting, right?
Wilder is here.
Oh, Mr. Wilder is here. Okay, I thought that you were gonna be up in Maine. Okay, all right. So, well, I guess if you'd like to come up then.
Just so you're aware, Mr. Chairman, we did send it to Mr. Brem, Mr. Wilder's representative for the project. He reviewed the decision letter, didn't have any questions or concerns with it as drafted.
Gotcha. All right, so just so that we level set, and this is as much as for myself as anyone else, we're talking about a preliminary subdivision plan, right?
Correct.
And the actions that this board can take this evening is we can either approve, disapprove, or approve with some conditions at this point, right? That's what we're, when we go to
Correct.
our decision this evening, that's how we can take an action on this, right?
Correct.
Great. All right, I guess to start, does anybody on the board have questions regarding what's contained in the decision or want to ask any further clarifying questions? Mike?
I do not.
No? Kate?
No, I did drive by and took a peek in there, and so I do have a sense of
It's a special
what it
place.
is. I still wish the hill could be moved another 20 feet east. It would,
Feel free to sit down, Mr. Wilder. if you-
Yeah, you don't have to stand
I'll
up.
stand.
Yeah.
I've been sitting all day.
he's been driving, so. So, you know, I do have concerns about the effect of that hill. A lot of, not concession, compromises having to be made in order to fit another house in there.
There is a large area in the back corner,
I appreciate
much larger than
that.
surrounding neighbor lots.
I appreciate that, it's everything to get there and to make it feasible to have a house there.
Mm.
Those are my concerns.
Right. Bob, any comments on the draft decision?
Yeah, as Kate said, I did also drive up there and take a look at the site from Echo Crossing. My biggest concern is the proposed driveway that would be unpaved. And specifically, I have the most concerns regarding that when it's initially disturbed and the utilities are placed. I'm just very concerned about the potential for runoff down that hill from that disturbance at that time. We've had some bad experiences in the past in Penn where a disturbance occurred for what was going to be paved, but just in that short period of time when the earth was disturbed and had not had any kind of surface placed over it, we had some real bad issues. And in this case here, it's going to remain unpaved for the bulk of its life.
Well,
And,
that's what he's
that makes me-
That's what he's requesting. That's not what he necessarily gets.
I understand. So that's my biggest concern is with granting that request.
Mm.
So,
If I can say something
That's
towards that
all.
end.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
We did some work last fall, a couple of big loads of dirt, some regrading, trying to reduce some of that runoff. I think it worked. Over the winter, it's pretty much held. And it does help with traction in the wintertime not being paved, because you get the rocks under there, they break up and come through the snow, and
Yeah,
it's helpful in that regard.
yeah. I mean,
There's some drainage ditches or something might be better, but
yeah. Bob, any other comments?
The only thing I would add to that is we seemingly in the past 10, 15 years have had numerous so-called 100-year, 500-year storms.
Right.
And that's the event I'm most afraid of. You know, we've got the traditional, conventional runoff from our everyday storms. But what happens in the event of a big one, especially if that big one occurs in close time sense to when that earth is disturbed? I think we have to be concerned with that, and what the potential effect is on 4, 6, and 8 Alcorn Crossing. So with that, that's all I have.
I will say that this morning I did go down Flag Road after all that rain, and there was water running down towards the wetlands, towards Alcorn. I didn't see any sediment or any dirt, but there certainly was water coming that way, and I don't know if that's the natural way the water goes.
Yeah.
I noticed that today too. Coming in.
I guess I'm the only one who has not seen the site, but in looking at the plans, and I'll echo some of Bob's comments, what I will be looking for in the final proposal is the care and the stormwater management of that road. I definitely agree that the biggest challenge to this project is going to be the actual access back to, you know, where you're proposing to put the house. You know, understanding that there's some desirability here on keeping it natural and not paving it. What I'm thinking about is, okay, so over time you're going to have somebody occupy this, right, who has to, plow it in the wintertime. If it's a gravel road, that road's going to degrade. It's going to need to be regraded regularly. And I'm sort of concerned about ultimately deterioration of that roadway and the impact that could have on the neighbors on Alcorn. So I'll definitely be looking for engineering to opine on whether or not an unpaved roadway over time is going to allow for effective stormwater management, or whether we're going to need to require that driveway actually be paved so that it can be maintained in a way that doesn't negatively impact the neighbors over time. To me, that's hands down the biggest challenge with this project. Okay. So, we can go to the public if anybody has any comments. You can hang out or have a seat. Or whatever you want to do. Yeah, we know where you are. Hi, name and address for the record, please.
Vimalan Rajalingam, 10 Alcorn. Just for everybody's benefit, could you explain the procedure from preliminary approval to what the final approval is, and what's the time frame? I presume engineering is going to take a look at it, peg all of the designs and whatnot, and then all of you visit the site and take a look, or what's the procedure?
Yeah. Joe, do you want me to take a pass at that, and then you
Sure.
So what we're doing now is we're offering an opinion on the preliminary plan, right? At this point, we're giving the applicant essentially guidance, and we're telling them what we expect to see in the final plans when those come before us. So yeah, once there's a final proposal, they will work very closely with engineering. It'll be another public hearing process. We'll get much deeper into the weeds than we have with the preliminary process, as far as understanding stormwater calculations and things like that could have a negative impact on the neighbors. And that's where you'll hear this board sort of dig in on items that we've sort of called to the surface in this meeting to get clarification before we render the ultimate decision, approval or disapproval, for the final subdivision plan.
Fair enough. So I presume we obviously have professionals to do their job, but so two things I wanted to just pinpoint, and Kate alluded to it. It's a 6-acre property, yes, but there's a 40-foot hill right in the middle of it.
Yep.
All right, and there's 6 houses around it, and they're all in flat land, and Mr. Wilder has a beautiful home on top of the hill, but all the access has to be involving cutting the side of the hill, and to a significant length, right? And you're going to have to consider retaining walls and paved, unpaved, all of these things. And it was brought up, okay, yeah, it could be a country road, but how many 4,000 square foot brand new homes do we have in town with gravel road?
Yep.
Right, so those are my things, and whatever the city approves, how is that going to be protected going forward? Is that going to be written documents that state this area cannot be cut, or this is the agreement for the roads and whatever else?
Yep.
Is that?
You want to take that?
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna,
Oh,
I was gonna, yeah, so when engineering reviews it, they look for the stormwater, the runoff and such. So they will determine, based on the needs for the house and the water that currently runs off, how much of the, existing trees and such have to remain as is. And there is a no-cut line that's created, and we require markers on the edges of it usually, so that the homeowner knows, I can't cut beyond here. It's
Perfect,
also in the deed, it's on the plans and such.
Okay, and then the last thing, just the time frame for what can we expect as the time frame from the preliminary approval till whenever the final plans come up?
Yeah, I mean, there's no set requirement per se. I mean,
Yep.
sometimes folks file preliminary and then they never pursue a definitive. So there's no set requirement that they have to submit a definitive plan within a certain amount of time. Typically, preliminary subdivisions are used to freeze zoning requirements. If there was, for some reason, the town was going to look to change a frontage requirement, for instance, they were going to increase it. If you filed a preliminary plan prior to that change, for a certain period of time under Mass General Law, you could freeze the zoning requirement at 200, for instance. So that's what the preliminary process is typically kind of used for. It could also be, affecting frontage requirements or use requirements or things like that. Also, just to add on to a couple of things, if a definitive plan is filed, there would be notice that would be sent out to all abutters again, so you would be notified of when that happens. And also, if ultimately something were approved to get built out there, it's incumbent upon all town staff to make sure what is approved by the board is what's constructed in the field. There is typically pre-construction meetings where plans are reviewed with whoever is going to do the building of the project, and then inspections throughout the duration of the project.
All right, great, that's all I had.
And just the one other thing that you sort of asked that I'll add on to what Kate said is, a lot of times if a subdivision's being put in, there'll be a homeowners association which will be required. So if stormwater management is required to maintain certain things, those conditions are often built into the homeowners association to maintain the stormwater protection systems in a way that, and those records will be brought into town hall, I think, on an annual basis. We
So
usually ask
that would
for
be the two
a maintenance
homes
log.
on flag, or, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's all I had.
So those are all the mechanisms that the board can use to essentially enforce that what gets decided in the plans that get, if they were to be approved, are maintained per the way that the board wanted them to be maintained at the time of its decision.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Anybody else have comments before the board makes a decision on this?
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, come on up, name and address for the record.
My name's Lori Cogliano, and I'm at 12 Alcorn. And I'm right behind where the septic system would be going in. And so my concern would be, like we talked about, the disturbing of the earth that's there now. And it's not like the driveway, but the septic area, you need to dig underneath and I know when I put my pool in, I know what was under there and what it took to do all that and how many trees we had to cut down. So basically, I'm just worried about the ramifications on my property once this happens. So I'm just not too pleased about the septic going right there and this project happening like that.
Yep.
And it's quite a distance from the home itself.
Yep.
So is everything going to go smoothly with that long of, a distance away?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Mr. Brem because I'm not the applicant. I think last time what I recall hearing is that there would be some sort of a pump involved and that's not unusual, and they've done this in other developments. But, those are, again, things that would get explored in more detail if we get to a definitive subdivision plan, and you can expect that you'd hear the board ask some questions about how that system is actually engineered to work.
And it would have to also go through Board of Health
Yeah, of course.
review.
Would the engineering department, could they come out and kind of talk to us about the changes that are going to be made and what it would do to our property?
So, can I ask, what ramifications are you concerned about?
Taking down all those trees, changing the earth, we've getting floodwaters, disturbing our pool.
Right, so I
And-
think that that's a great question about the floodwaters, right, with the water coming down the hill. But then again, that's all with the stormwater management, right? When they design that septic system, it's however they're gonna design it, all that's taken into calculation of where that water's gonna go and the direction it's gonna go. And they can't just run the water into your property coming down the hill. So that's all gonna be designed to flow where it's supposed to flow, and, you know, depending on the amount of water, if there's gonna be detention ponds and whatnot. So all that has to be taken into consideration before they can even get a permit to do it. They can't knowingly go ahead and start dumping water into your yard.
No, I get that, but what's supposed to happen and what happens?
Well, that's why
Are
we
two
have,
different
you know,
things.
Absolutely. We have boards in this
So-
town to make sure that, you know, people are doing what's supposed to, town employees and engineers, and the Board of Health will make sure the plans or the system's put in accordance to the plans, and there are checks and balances for this. And there's also, you have the absolute option, that if you're not happy with the way things are going, to call the town and call the building inspector and say, look, I don't think this is going in according to plans, and they can stop the work if that's the case. So while I think that we have the checks and balances within the town and in the departments, certainly if a homeowner or a neighbor sees something that they don't think is going correctly, they have the right to make the call and get those questions answered.
One of the other things that'll happen if we see a definitive subdivision plan is, generally speaking, this board will go out for a site walk. Some of us have seen the property, some of us have not. So
We've seen the beginning of it.
We've seen the start of the property. So I'm sure we will walk back in that area. We oftentimes ask applicants to denote on the plan set trees above a certain size that are gonna be removed. So, I suspect in a plan like this, even though it's really, we're doing this all for one house, I expect with some of the complexities in the septic, we might ask for some clarification on how much tree clearing, et cetera, is gonna really be needed to facilitate putting in some of the engineering structures that they're proposing for this property.
So I'm not an engineer, and unfortunately, I would just see the damage before I can call and complain to anybody about they're doing this incorrectly.
Yep.
So that's just, I just wanted to get it out there.
Yep.
That's what I'm worried about.
Understood. Please, name and address for the record. Sure.
Rob Forrest, 3 Alcorn. So I guess the question before us really isn't, does Mr. Wilder have the right to develop his property? He absolutely does. And it should be in accordance with all the regulations. My understanding is that the proposal on Plan B is in accordance with all the regulations, and he has the opportunity to do that. The question is does he have the right to come in and ask for a lot of waivers, impact 5 people for one house? That's what this board has to decide, right? And so I was wondering, I asked the question last time, how many people have gone and seen it? And so I think most people have. I'm not sure, Mr. O'Connor, have you seen it?
I have not seen the property, no.
Okay, so Ms. Hollister, have you seen it?
I've seen as much as I can without having permission to walk the entire property.
Okay, and I think Mr. Bonhart, you said yes last
Up
meeting
there, and
that you
I've been
did.
through Alcorn.
Okay, so you have to
So
see
I've
it
been
from.
through
you have-
Alcorn,
You
yeah.
have seen it, so you understand, there is not much space to put a house in that lot. There's gonna be very little, and like you said initially in the meeting, it's gonna be shoehorned in there.
I don't think I said that.
You did, we can go back. I think you actually said it was in a positive light. You said, oh, great, we can shoehorn one right in there. Those are your exact words, so we can go back and look at it. But anyway, so, given all that, the board is going ahead and they're gonna do a preliminary approval here, it seems like. You've already given that. So I've got a couple of questions on how that happens. So, in the letter that's in front of us, it says that you approved waivers 3, 4, and 7, I think. So waivers 1, 2, 5, and 6 supposedly needed further input before a decision could be made. So I wonder how the board is going to render a decision tonight without that further input.
We don't do, we don't vote on waivers tonight. Anything we do is non-binding.
It's conceptual.
Yeah.
Well, it's
No,
conceptual.
I understand, but in there you say that you have to, and at the last meeting.
We say we don't have many objections to the waivers, I forget what they were, but they were related to the entrance and to the pavement, how much of the pavement needs to be at the entrance and such. But the waivers that you're referring to, as I recall, had to do with the road, the driveway going to the house, the proposed house in the back, like the pavement and such. And there were a lot of things that fire department had questions about. So part of this is we can't vote on these other, we can't give an opinion on these other waivers at this time because it'll all depend on the plan that's proposed and the fire department's response to the initial plan, and then all of the dialogues that we have and the potential changes to the plans that come around as a result of the public hearing process. So that's all that this is saying, is that we're not making anything pro or con again about those other waivers because we don't have the information to make an opinion.
Until it's a definitive subdivision plan, this is a theoretical discussion.
Understood, but my understanding was the premise of this whole thing, and to be fair to Mr. Wilder, was that we were gonna look at this to see if it was acceptable to move forward, because they were gonna spend a lot of money to get to a definitive plan, right?
Right.
So I would think that the board takes seriously this decision and not say, oh, we'll figure out whether or not we're gonna approve waivers down the road.
Okay.
Especially after last meeting where supposedly there was supposed to be input from the fire department, which I did not hear happened yet. And so again, I wonder how the board is gonna render a decision this evening without that input from the fire department, which was specifically about the road and the pavement and the width, which everybody did have major concerns. Mr. O'Connor, your main concern was that road.
Yep.
So,
Did we get any follow-up feedback from the fire department regarding whether or not fire suppression systems in the house would mitigate any of their concerns regarding pavement width and roadway width?
So we haven't gotten any kind of report from the fire department. I mean, there hasn't been a definitive plan submitted to the board for further review and comment. I
Right.
think once additional topography information is provided, they'll be able to, further their review.
Yep.
That being said, I'm sure that, fire suppression system aside, they will still have concerns about the material that is used and the width that is provided for any kind of access drive up to a new home or
Right.
or whatever, or have
Right.
you.
I have a question for you. You referenced a Plan B. What Plan B are you?
there was a proposal A, right, which we're talking about now, and proposal
Oh,
B.
the length of
Building the
the,
bulk.
okay, got it. Thank you, yeah, yeah.
Right within the 15
Right,
feet,
right,
proposal
yep.
B is further up.
Thank you, okay.
So I did speak to Lieutenant Parsons, and he said, oh, no, it's not, because our concern was that it seemed as though you could put a sprinkler system in a house and negate all the other rules about that, right? And
No,
and
no.
that's what I asked Lieutenant Parsons, he said, oh, no.
Yep.
We have to talk to the planning board about that. So the planning board and Lieutenant Parsons have obviously not spoken yet, so again, I ask, how do you render a decision this evening on how you do that? I'd also like to back up a little bit and say, I specifically haven't said it, but I'm gonna say it now, is I believe, at least speaking for myself and for the neighbors, is we believe that you should reject this plan and disapprove it. People have been voicing concerns. Again, this is not something we do. You guys sit here, you're the planning board, you hear this all the time.
Yep.
We're just normal citizens coming up and trying to defend our rights and not have a major impact to our neighborhood.
Yep.
And a negative impact at that.
Yep.
And I think everybody believes it, and I would ask everybody that's here, if I'm not speaking for them, then they should come up and say, no, I think you should approve it, or they're okay with you approving it.
Yep. Well, I don't want to speak for my fellow board members, but we're all residents too. We all do live in town, that's a requirement, and all of us are here because we actually do care very much about the decisions that are made that affect people who live in the town. So, this isn't like, some anointed position where, we were, it was a gift from God that we could all be here, till all hours on Monday evenings listening to decisions about subdivisions. But I will say that this board has, always tried to do what's right for not just the property owners, but also the abutters to the property, and it's always a balancing act between the rights of both parties. So I would expect nothing less with the decision we reached tonight, as well as the decision that we will make if and when a definitive subdivision plan comes before us for consideration.
Okay. I think Mr. Schaefer's on the phone. On the April 4th meeting, he had mentioned that aesthetics were considered. And I'm not sure, because the gentleman who was representing the applicant said those should not factor in. But Mr. Schaefer did say you do. Can you please explain, does it or does not aesthetics apply? And if so, the people who have seen Elkhorn and understand with a huge house going in right next there, how that would not be an eyesore for the rest of the division.
I will take a shot at answering this, and Joe, keep me, in bounds if I go out of bounds. My understanding is that the aesthetics of the subdivision are not a decision-making criteria that this board can consider when rendering its decisions. It's not.
Mr. Schaefer was incorrect when he said we do consider that.
Bob, you want to defend your statement?
I think I simply asked if aesthetics were taken into account. I never stated that we could consider aesthetics. Well, we can certainly ask about it, but we can't use it as a criteria for making a decision.
Mm-hmm. But there are aesthetics, there are natural aesthetics. When we do the site walk, we look for natural features that are worth trying to preserve. So that kind of aesthetic we can try and horse trade with, but
Again, it's a horse trade, right?
That's a
This is
horse
things that we
trade.
can request of an applicant, but not demand.
Oh, right, and a lot of times that these decisions come down to trying to nudge applicants in the right direction to do the right thing with a subdivision for the benefit of abutters, and we find ourselves in that position a lot. But to answer your question directly, short of the actual setbacks as required by the zoning bylaws, aesthetics, like the proximity of this house to your house, if they're within the setbacks by right, that is not a decision that we can render a decision upon. We can't say, well, that you're gonna be awfully close to the houses on Alcorn and it's gonna seem like this is an Alcorn house. Not something that can influence this board's decision in this case.
So there's been a drawing put forth, though, that shows the house has certain setbacks and all that other stuff. And I think we all know that that's not what's gonna happen when the builder actually gets in it, because there's no room there, and they're gonna put it up to the 15 feet setback, and it's gonna be right on Alcorn.
Again, those are things that can be guaranteed with conditions of approval in the decision. But I mean, I appreciate where you're coming from, but at this point now you are speculating.
Well, what I'm trying to get to is that this board says that they can approve with conditions, right? And so how do we get those conditions to protect the neighbors in this form so that it goes to the definitive plan?
So the way, this is Bob, let me just answer this a couple things. One, the way you get those, you can make a request as a group of the neighbors as to certain conditions, okay? And we ask that you be reasonable. If the condition is we ask that you not build this house, that doesn't give us anything to work with. But if you recall, during the last meeting, I believe it was the meeting when I asked about aesthetics, I did ask the representative of the applicant if they could extend the no disturb, no cut zone further up the property boundary, okay? And that kind of helps protect that so-called setback that you were referencing. That's the kind of conditions that we can levy. We could even levy a larger no-cut zone if we felt it would be feasible and it would benefit all of those concerned in the project.
Bob?
So that's the kind of conditions that we can levy.
Bob, you're not talking about the decision for the preliminary, you're talking about the decision if they come forward with a definitive plan, correct?
It's both, because I asked if they could do this, and I noticed it's in our minutes tonight from last meeting that I made this request, and that Mr. Brem agreed to that.
Right, and Bob, I think it should be clear, it's not that we can levy, it's we can request and then
We can
condition.
request, yeah.
Right, exactly.
And I did request that, and we did get an affirmative that they thought it was reasonable to make that request and grant it.
Right, and when those conditions are applied to a definitive subdivision plan, there can be checks and balances which the town engineering staff actually goes and carries out, where they can be on site during construction. And if they were approved to put a house that is 50 feet from the property line and they're building it only 30 feet, that can result in a stop work order. I believe it was the last meeting or the meeting before last, we actually had a stop work order on the docket. I think it was after this item, so folks had probably left, but we actually were hearing a stop work order for a parcel actually near Hartford Road, where the applicant had exceeded what they were permitted to do during the off season with regard to clearing the roadway to prepare the roadway for entrance, and there was a stop work order and they had to stop all work on the site. So So it isn't as if orders of conditions against definitive approved plans are not enforceable. They are very much enforceable.
No, I understand, but they changed. I've experienced it firsthand. The house that's, I don't know what the number is. I think it's 3 that was put in behind me, was approved for 21 feet off the property line. Guess what it got moved to? 16.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right? So we know what happens.
Well, so we don't know what happens. We don't know if that was part of it. We don't know if that 21 feet was conceptual as they drew it. We don't know if it was conditioned for 21 feet. I mean, if he's in the 15-foot sideline setback, unless it's conditioned otherwise, they can go right up to that 15-foot sideline setback, just as you folks can clear right to the property line. Now, they're willing to give 15 feet of a no-cut zone.
Yeah, so what I'm asking the board to do is, if they're gonna approve it, then you said you can do it with conditions. So why can't you put a condition that there's a 15 no-cut zone all around, or whatever else it might be?
I believe we've actually achieved that. We've already asked the applicant or requested.
I think it says we advise.
At this point,
that's what we can do.
we advise.
And at this point, it's,
We're-
again, conceptual.
Again, we're not taking action on a definitive subdivision. We're giving guidance to an applicant, and the conditions that we can, we can approve with conditions, or, tonight are things that we will expect to see if a definitive subdivision plan comes before us based off of this conceptual plan.
But I go back to being fair to the Wilders about
They-
spending the money to get to a definitive plan.
They've heard what we've said, they've heard what you, the abutters, have said. It's their crapshoot, what they have to decide whether or not they want to take any risks in going forward. That they're the ones that have to decide, is it worth it for us? All the things that that people would like us to do, is it affordable to do them all? Is it good neighbor? They might decide we want to be good neighbors. Who knows? It's not up to us. It's up to the Wilders to decide whether or not they want to proceed. We're just saying, if you proceed, these are the things, the concerns that have been raised that we'll be looking out for.
And that we will expect to see in the definitive plan.
Yeah, and because if he decides to subdivide and sell it to a developer and such, the preliminary plan or decision goes with it, and when we have when it comes before us, we get a copy of the decision for this preliminary, so that it's on the record that these are the things that were talked about before.
And I think it's important to note that any decision of this board on the preliminary is not binding. Whether we approve or reject this preliminary plan at this time is not binding on the future planning board, whether it's these 5 members or different configuration at that time when the definitive comes before the board. It is not binding. The only thing that is binding that I can think of with respect to submission of a preliminary subdivision plan is if it's done within, and the definitive is filed within the appropriate amount of time after the definitive has been applied for. Zoning is frozen. That is the only thing that really happens as a result of a preliminary plan being filed. Zoning is frozen. You cannot have a definitive be subject to new zoning bylaw, new zoning regulations when it's filed later on.
Right.
So any decision tonight is really non-binding. It is simply advisory to the applicant what the sense and feeling of this board is.
Right.
Yes, and my understanding is by approval, you're basically saying, yeah, go ahead with it.
We're saying if we approve it, we're saying we don't have major concerns. We have concerns. We've enumerated them in the decision for this.
Yep.
And you need to take them into account when you do so, if you do decide.
So basically, it's okay to go ahead and plan it. We'll have to cross some Ts and dot some Is, but essentially, you'll be able to do the development as planned.
Well, town engineering is going to be a lot more involved than they've been. They've really done no review of this at all, and we've gotten no official brief from town engineering on their opinions on. I think we had some comments, right? He had looked at the preliminary plan, but I mean, it was not the deep dive that will happen if a definitive plan comes before us.
Okay, I guess, given that there's a lot of objection to this proposal, and that it's gonna physically impact at least 5 people, physically, their backyards are gonna change permanently, and there may be a lot of problems with that, but I know the engineering will take care of that and all those things. And the aesthetics of the neighborhood is gonna change because this is gonna be a house on Elkhorn Crossing that is not on Elkhorn Crossing, right? And there's nothing that says right now that can't be the back of a house right on Elkhorn Crossing, right? Plus, there's many waivers that are being asked here, right? I'd like each of the board to explain specifically why it's in your judgment, in the public interest, to approve this.
I guess I'm not going to answer that question, but I would respond to your comment. What you actually just gave us some information that might be one of those items we would put in conditions. And we could certainly, in the future, during a definitive discussion of this property, request that the siting of the house be done so that it looks like it's sited in a compatible fashion with the homes in Alcorn Crossing.
Yeah.
I mean, that is in our power to make that request.
I mean, we had a gentleman here who thought that we were crazy for turning the front of the house to face Alcorn so it looked less like the side of the house because we don't have a southern exposure now, so the future owners of this house would be disadvantaged from taking advantage of, say, solar energy if they wanted to do it, right? So I'm also not going to exactly take the bait and answer your question and give you a dialogue other than to say that I firmly believe in the rights of property owners in the town to develop their parcels within the zoning bylaws, and when I look at the list of potential waivers that will be needed, this is not so egregious that we couldn't either, one, condition those waivers or deny them and have the applicant be forced to engineer a manner to get back to that back part of the property in a way that would be more consistent and require less waivers to the zoning bylaws. So I see no reason to disapprove of this evening because, again, we're at a non-binding preliminary stage and this is not the final plan. So that's my answer, Dave.
And I'll say this, and I mean this respectfully, but the 5 people can certainly approach Mr. Wilder and purchase this property.
Right, sure.
I'm not
I
understanding.
don't see why we should purchase their land. That doesn't make sense.
Well, that would protect it, so
Right.
you would have the choice of what happens there.
I'm
We
confused, so
we get this with every development, the abutters who have been there a long time, they've seen the woods, it's their woods, that's wonderful. To be honest, we hear this every single time. I'm gonna lose my view, it's gonna affect my property values, and down the road, everybody forgets that stuff.
I understand that, because I've gone through it firsthand. I lost my backyard, and it's fine, right? And I had to spend money to put up some trees. I'm okay with that.
Well,
But
and
the
in
problem,
fact, further to Kate's point, some of us are on this board because we've actually been through the experience that you guys are going through right now and have a direct, in our past experience, have been in the exact same seats that you guys are in, so have a full appreciation for what you're going through. And part of the reason we do this job on Monday nights is to try to do our best to protect the rights of the abutters as well as the property owners. I already said that
yeah,
in my opening comments.
and again,
Sir, I appreciate where you're going with this. We do have other agenda items to get to. If you're not going to a point, I'm going to ask you to wrap your comments so we can take the next one.
my point is that I believe the board should disapprove this.
We've heard you loud and clear on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one more comment, and direct to Mr. Bonifant, with all due respect. So my understanding is that you're affiliated with a company that does septic work in the town.
That's correct.
And so I assume that either you're recused from the vote or that company would not be able to quote on any job for our 8 flag. Otherwise, there would be a conflict of
certainly
interest.
going to comment that, not even in my purview right now.
That there would be no conflict of interest.
I would certainly make sure there is no conflict of interest in anything I do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience before we go to decision? Please step up, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Kathy Lee from 8 Elkhorn. So I would like to ask the board members that, as you can see, there are many residents of Elkhorn that have serious concerns about this proposal. I just would like to ask you to take our concerns seriously and sincerely. I think this proposal should not be approved, looking at these concerns. So I just like to mention that.
Thank you.
Marvin Morello, 6 Alcorn Crossing. I'm insulted with the fact that you said it might disturb our view. It doesn't disturb our view. My house basically sits here, and the way his property is, it sits up on a hill. What they want to do is they want to literally put a driveway in my backyard. That's what I have a problem with. It's not the view. It's insulting.
Thanks. Any other comments? Please step up, name and address for the record.
Hi, Sung Son, 8 Alcorn. So, yeah, I just want to point out, I just want to step back and then read the document on the goal of the planning board posted on the webpage. I don't know whether you actually read it. So I'm just going to read it. Plans are carefully scrutinized for roadway design, drainage, soil conditions, location of structures, safety, and a host of other criteria to make sure project have a positive impact on our community. So I assume the board member will have a same understanding regarding positive and community.
Yep.
That's my comment.
Yep. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. All right. So we are on to an opinion on the decision. So would someone like to put forward a motion on PB 2204, the preliminary subdivision plan for 8 Flag Road?
I move that we vote to approve the preliminary decision, the decision on the preliminary subdivision for 8 Flag Road.
Okay. Once again, we can approve, we can disapprove, we can approve with conditions. We'll go around the horn. Bob.
Need a second?
I would.
Oh, I need a second. I apologize. We need a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. We'll go around the horn for our decisions. Bob?
I guess I would like to discuss the condition I spoke of first regarding that this driveway must be paved. It cannot be left unpaved. My proposal that condition be added to this approval.
I think it's a reasonable.
Yep. I would second that. So is that an approval and that is your condition, Bob?
Yes. My condition would be that in order to approve it, we must require that the driveway for the new parcel, any new driveway must be paved. Any new portions.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Kate?
My vote's no.
Okay. Kate votes to disapprove of the preliminary subdivision plan. Mike?
I vote to approve with Bob's condition.
All right, I vote to approve, and I will further Bob's condition. I agree with the paving. I also would like to see the road width conform to the fire department's standards. So essentially, I'm saying that the width of the roadway must meet the fire department's criteria for being able to get their access vehicles down there, as well as the condition to minimize the clearing of trees, only to those trees which are necessary. And if a definitive comes before us, I do expect on this plan to see all trees of the size that's required by the zoning bylaw to be noted on the plan, including which ones would be removed as part of the development.
I would agree with that condition.
As do I.
Just a quick question, the road width, is that supposed to be 12 feet, or is that?
It's going to be whatever satisfies the fire department for the requirements for their vehicles. All right. So we had 1 nay, 3, it sounds like, approvals with conditions. All right. So that closes our general business topic. Yeah, please.
So just for the benefit of the audience, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. So the waivers that they're looking for have to do with the roadway, okay? And so if there's a plan B, if they went in and they built that bulb to basically be a cul-de-sac, they could put driveways in and really take any control or suggestions that we have out of there, right? So I think my point is that they can do this as a matter of right. It's in your benefit to help work with the Wilders to get any concessions that you can, right? I don't think anybody wants a cul-de-sac right there, and just basically they can do as they want with the driveways.
I think your comments are very well taken. And I would offer to the abutters who've expressed concerns, this board has heard them, but you need to understand that property owners can develop their parcels in manners that are consistent with the zoning bylaws. So while you may not think that this board is operating in your best interests, you might be surprised what we've seen come before us when preliminary subdivisions, which are more modest by design, are rejected, and the applicant comes back with a much more robust plan with many fewer waivers. You might be surprised how your backyards can change then. I'm closing this item so we can move on. Nope. I'm closing the item. We're moving on. All right. We're moving on to general business topic C, which is potential changes to accessory dwelling units section of the zoning bylaw. So, Joe.
Yes.
Let's talk about accessory dwelling units.
All right. So I have some notes from Sierra, who's kind of been leading the charge on modifying the accessory dwelling unit
Could
bylaw.
somebody please close the doors, thanks?
Yeah, hold on.
So
Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
That's good. So the chart that's in your packet, I believe you've seen before,
Yep.
asks for some additional information on
Yes.
there. So we did some further digging to see if there were some additional variances that should have been required on
Yep.
some of the larger items, or some of the larger units, I should say, that were approved. Turns out, no, they were all within the regulations. There were actually some smaller ones, and again, take this with a grain of salt. It was, not looked at by the building commissioner. Some of the smaller ones should have required potentially some variances as part of their approval process. But not some of the larger ones that you see. They were part of some very large houses, so they were within that percentage requirement. We also got some information from the building commissioner regarding some energy efficiency requirements, some universal design elements. Those were in the packet as well.
Yep.
And kind of doing some digging on that and what some other communities have done. We decided to try to take that out. You'll notice in some of the new changes of taking that out of the language and trying to make it a little more generic in order to allow some discretion to the board in order to allow, if someone were creating an accessory dwelling unit that had some of these elements in it, that they could allow something over 900 square feet. If they could demonstrate that they were doing something for somebody with a disability, putting in some of these universal design elements, that perhaps something a little bit larger than 900 square feet could be approved as part of the special permit process. Just looking at the notes here. So just as a quick reminder, some of the goals of this bylaw update are to kind of get rid of some of the math that's required in terms of the percentages, just make it a flat 900 square feet.
Yep.
That coincides with the state's requirement for accessory dwelling units, and actually matches the average of what boards have seen within the last 7 years in looking at this data. It also cleans up some of the change of ownership and having somebody declare they're going to be there for more than 6 months at a time. It kind of gives a little bit of, makes it a little less onerous in terms of getting that materials to us.
Yep.
So again, some of the new changes, taking out, specifically universal design and energy efficiency requirements, as they may change over time. It's trying to make it a little more generic, as in if applicants demonstrate that they're going above and beyond what you would see is just your bare minimum requirements, the board may consider something greater than 900 square feet. Making it that the primary dwelling unit must be larger than the accessory dwelling unit. That's not specified in there now. And then just some clarification on the parking requirement, that there needs to be one additional parking space available made on site for parking. So that's kind of where we are now. We're open to any edits, questions, concerns you may have. And then, from there, also hearing back giving this feedback to the Board of Appeals, getting anything they have, and then potentially going to town council to have them review it from there.
Yeah. Are you looking for us to take a vote on this tonight, or?
You don't need a vote, but just if there's anything specific in the proposed changes that you see that you don't like, or you want added, or you have questions on, we're happy to address that.
Great. All right. Let's go to the board. Bob, did you have any comments on the 8 accessory dwelling units section?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, there's a lot of good additional fixes here. I guess I had a couple questions. The first question has to do under section 3.3.1, and specifically with item number 4, provide housing options for residents who cannot afford or who do not desire a single unit house with land. And I guess I'm looking at this wondering what it adds. It seems to add a lot more specificity about a very specific situation that to me seemed to be just an overspecification of what was described in item 2. And as written here, I have a concern because it uses the term residence. And I'm wondering if that was intentional, and how it differentiated for number 2. And it also went so specific as to say they do not desire a single unit house with land. And that concerns me from the sense that, well, if you're buying a house in Westford, that's what you're getting. You're getting a single unit house with land. So what are we trying to do here? So I think that my recommendation might be to strike number 4. Because it didn't seem to add anything, and it seemed to fly in the face of what the intent of most of our zoning in Westford is trying to accomplish. And then the other one was item 7, which was add moderately priced. I'm trying to get back to where I found that one. Yeah, same area. Add moderately priced rental units to the housing stock. And I guess I'm kind of opposed to this as well. I want to see us add moderately priced rental units to our housing stock, but I don't necessarily think we should be doing it in single-family home neighborhoods in particular. I do agree with the ability for us to provide for our residents who are struggling to afford their home under number 2. But I just don't think the direction of this town is to be adding rental units forcefully into these single-family neighborhoods. And so I just want to have that discussion with my fellow board members, how they feel about 4 and 7. And that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Well, shall we get the board's opinion on number 4 and number 7?
Thanks, Bob, because in general, I agree with the changes to the bylaw. I think that makes it clearer, makes it easier to implement and such. But I think a similar philosophical concern that you have, Bob. When does a single family, an accessory unit become a 2-family house rather than somebody add an accessory unit to help somebody out? And how does this affect our residential A and B zones? Because there's nothing here that would limit the number that there could be in a neighborhood. And I can just see the potential for, anything could happen. There could be a neighborhood where a lot of people decide, probably the neighborhood that wants Airbnbs, but where a lot of the people in the neighborhood might decide, well, I want to convert part of my house, or I want to add a structure to my property to be able to have a rental unit. And there's nothing in this proposed bylaw change that, and this is where I had the problem before, that it doesn't restrict it to help out disadvantaged people. It's just a way for people to, I'll add an accessory dwelling unit and make some money. And that's my concern, that it'll turn it could have this potential for people to just take advantage of this bylaw just to make money rather than to actually help somebody, whether it's a family member or because they're altruistic and want to help disabled people.
Okay. Mike?
Well, it's kind of a conundrum, right? So I've been before ZBA on several, if not more of those ones that have gone through because of the ambiguity of the bylaw and some of the changes that need to be made. I think for the most part, I agree with the changes, but I also tend to agree with what Kate and Bob are saying. I think that we should have further discussion on those points. But I mean, it's contradictory the way the bylaw is written currently, and it makes it difficult in those cases where I think it's appropriate to even to get through.
So I could see getting rid of that purpose number 4, and I could see getting rid of that purpose number 7, because those would be encouraging the conditions that we have concerns about.
Well, I mean, I think you could take the affordability component of 4 and add it to 2. So you could say something like, to enable owners of a single-family dwelling larger or more expensive than required for their present needs, particularly elderly homeowners, to share space and the burden of homeownership. And you essentially take the disadvantaged part of 4. What I don't like about 4 is the who do not desire, because that leaves it very open-ended. I think who cannot afford is a very legitimate rationale where someone might choose to add an accessory dwelling unit, but I just think simply for the seeking the desire to, to your point,
The scenarios that I've had with clients is that a woman or family, had MS.
Yeah.
And so she had her mother and father build a unit to live with.
Yeah.
Another one was a couple that were downsizing and their kid, their son and family were moving into the big house and they moved to the small, right? And I think that's appropriate.
And I generally feel like that's when people would take advantage of this. I don't think people who have no economic need or have a driving incentive within their family or something else are going to take advantage of this, because it's kind of a lot of work to go through. Like,
well, and also, I mean, to the point that people are just going to start renting out rooms, right? You're not going to have somebody on Alcorn Crossing that's going to put their garage up as a accessory dwelling unit to make extra money. I don't know that that's going to be an issue, but also don't know that we want to drive that point home either.
But I also want to ask the question, I mean, is the intention that one of these purposes will be stated with the application to add an ADU? I sort of feel like this is just general language that's giving guidance to why it's in the bylaw, not necessarily something that the board hearing this, a request for an ADU, is going to say, well, which of these criteria does it meet, or am I wrong?
No, that's correct. It's giving some general language for the purpose of the bylaw.
Right.
I think, in terms of number 4, I think some of the thinking there was, if I currently wasn't a resident of Westford, so maybe the word residence also is a issue. But I were looking for someplace that had accessory dwelling unit already, also in terms of the point of trying to clean up some of the change of ownership stuff. If I find a house that already has an accessory dwelling unit in it, that could be an option for me. Because we could see that as an issue over time as well, for folks looking to utilize this portion of the bylaw. But I definitely hear the concerns about desire and how it may change the character of some of the existing housing stock here in town. I think too, just something to keep in mind, it's not a requirement that it has to be a family member. We can't regulate that. So it could be rented to somebody that's unrelated, whoever owns the home.
Yep.
But I know that's all things you have to weigh out.
And we can't regulate that it has to be for a disadvantaged person for whatever reason.
I would agree. I mean, we've talked some about 4. How do you guys feel about number 7 that Bob called out? Because I would also say that, I mean, I guess I didn't go into this discussion thinking that accessory dwelling units were like part of, I mean, I get it, they're part of the rental stock of real estate in the town, but I guess I wasn't really thinking of them that way, because while it's certainly possible, again, I'm thinking most families that put this in place, it's either for maybe moving in a parent or a step parent, you know, or making a space available for their kid who doesn't yet economically have the ability to buy their own place, or, you know, I had a sense that it was going to be more like that, not saying like, oh, hey, there's this great new rental property, it just happens to be connected to a 4-bedroom colonial, right?
Yeah, that is by and large what you see for this type of permit. I think the thinking was, you know, too, there could be, you know, a gap in time where maybe it moves from an elderly to a single child, and maybe there's a gap in time where that transition happens, and they don't want to lose that use because they don't want it to consider it abandoned.
And no offense, but there's nothing in this bylaw that says that 900 square foot unit has to be moderately priced.
Right.
It could be a luxury 900 square foot unit.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that's,
And I think to your point too about where is the line between accessory unit versus, you know, a second unit, something that could be considered, just as I was, you know, listening to, is maybe like a max on what if the special permit granting authority is reviewing this and somebody's looking to add some energy efficient or universal design elements in there, what is their max number that they could go up to? I don't know. That's for you all to decide, but that could be a consideration as well.
yeah. My first house was a 2-family, so that I owned, and the rental, one of it was probably 800 or 900 square feet, so.
Anybody
I
else?
think the other thing that's important to remember here for accessory dwelling unit approvals by the special permit granting authority is that approval does not carry forward with the sale of the property.
Yes, it does.
The accessory dwelling unit?
Yeah, that was,
Transfer, and they have to sign an affidavit saying.
Right.
Yeah, it used to end, terminate immediately, but now it will continue on, and they have to attest that the owner's still occupying.
Right.
So it's not two rental units.
Correct.
Right.
That's the purpose of the changes behind 335.
Yeah.
Right. A streamlined process where instead of coming in before a board, they can just do this as part of paperwork at town hall.
Correct.
so could there was the discussion of adaptive versus accessible and all that. So is it possible to add a criterion that it has to, the accessory unit has to incorporate these type of amenities?
We could certainly look at and see if we could make it a requirement. It might be more something that can be encouraged, but we could certainly look at if it can be something that's required.
I don't know if that's legal or not, you know.
That's where town council's
Yeah.
review will come in, right?
Right. Bob, any other comments?
No.
Kate?
I think that's,
No, that's just a philosophical,
Yep.
you know, I know you can't have a bylaw that fits everything, otherwise you won't have anything, but.
Yeah. Mike?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see this going.
Yeah. Even with the issues, I think it's much better than what's there now.
Yeah. I thought the information also, thanks to Mr. Fontaine for the information on universal design, because it was actually interesting to read through that. I wasn't clear on the differences, and that document I thought was pretty helpful. And it did sort of spark my thinking in things that we could potentially require. Like, even I was thinking about, like, you know, flex plans and things like that. Like, is universal design something that could give like bonus credits, right? If it was like designed in a way that would be more easily accessible to a wider cross section of people. So I thought that was a helpful document.
Yeah, absolutely.
So did we give you something to go on, Joe?
Yeah, so we could, you know, potentially look at modifying and/or striking 4 and 7 from the purpose. And if there's anything else in any section that you want looked at more closely, we're happy to do that.
I thought the affordable piece in 4 might warrant tucking in somewhere else, maybe in 2, as I sort of proposed, but yeah.
No, I agree.
Okay. Are we good on that one? All right. Okay, we're on to general business item D, and
Chair,
we're
if I may ask, if we can review the minutes first, as I may have to.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. We're going to take the minutes out of order. So we will be approving the draft minutes of April 4th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of April 4th, 2022?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes from April 4th, 2022?
I just had a typo error on line 145, which is the top of page 4. It says, but building codes could change a result of, and it should be building codes could change as a result.
Yep.
That's it.
Thank you. Bob, any comments on the minutes?
No, I did not.
Mike?
I do not.
Okay. Motion and a second to approve the minutes of April 4th, 2022. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
I say aye. All right, with the minutes approved and nothing in correspondence reports and updates, we will go back to general business topic D, which is Tom Teller and Gary DiViello of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee providing...
DeBello.
DeBello, I apologize. Providing a presentation of the Westford Climate Roadmap. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for waiting.
And thank you for waiting through. And always action-packed planning board meeting.
Yes.
Even though I'm old, it's not my bedtime quite yet.
You got 15 minutes?
20. He has 20. 22.
Thank you for letting us present this evening. Tom is a member of also a member of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, as am I. He's also a member of the subcommittee that created this document. Well, and I'm not going to show you the whole document tonight. I hope you take a look at that at some point, but I'm just trying to cover the high points of the document. So anyway, I want you to note that says as V1. So what we're trying to do right now is collect comments from various boards and that we've presented this to.
And the public.
And the public. To produce a version 2 that we hope to put together by June of this year. So let's talk about our objectives here. So I'm just one of the members that are currently presenting this roadmap, and the planning board is just one of the boards that we've presented this to. So we're trying to communicate at least the goals and recommendations of the roadmap. We're gathering feedback for this version, and also requesting that your board support the goals of the roadmap when reviewing building plans. Next slide. Okay, you got it already. Yep. So how did we come to this? Well, the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee was created because of the climate resolution that overwhelmingly passed at the special town meeting in October 2020. That passed unanimously, and the Energy Committee became the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee that was created by the Select Board. Next slide. So let's give you some background to climate concerns. In March 2021, Massachusetts passed a sweeping climate bill. That law is dictating that the state must achieve net zero emissions by 2020. That's net zero greenhouse gas emissions.
2050. 2050.
2050. Globally, President Biden set the goal of net zero for the country by 2050. 100% renewable electricity by 2035. 50% of vehicles sold by 2030 will be electric vehicles. Totally electric vehicles. And We also have an IPCC report that was published which really warns us that the atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide are the highest they've been in 2 million years. I don't go back quite that far, but that's the science. And the past decade has been the hottest in 125,000 years. Ocean levels are rising, and I think we know that climate change is real. So at least here's some good news on the next slide, that costs have been going down for wind and solar energy. For instance, I have a solar system on my own home, and that cost, I put it off a year, and that cost went down by about $5,000 from the first quote I got to when I actually had that done. So the lifetime cost of electric vehicles is now less than fossil fuel vehicles. I have an electric vehicle. The largest expense I have is rotating the tires. There's no fluids to change, no oil to change, and it's quite reliable. Electric heat pumps, cold climate electric heat pumps are now viable in all climates, and the products and the prices are dropping. So let's look at a timeline here, quickly anyway, that I'll go right down to the Roadback version 1, the one that we're talking about, was published by the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee on November 2021. We're working now on our community engagement part of this plan, and we're hoping for endorsement of the version 2 of the select board by June. So the methodology now, if you have the actual slides for this, these are all, if you'd like to delve a little more deeply into this, these are all clickable links. We're certainly not the only town that's come up with a net zero climate action plan, and that amount of towns is increasing all the time. Notice that in Concord, where our neighbor in Concord has already come up with a plan, and that's on their website. Next. So one of the things that had to be done by the subcommittee was come out with a greenhouse gas inventory for the town of Westford. Now that was produced by using this tool that was developed by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and it's a standard adopted by many of the municipalities. So a quickie summary of what's on that is our buildings produce about 58% of our greenhouse gases, and transportation, that's trucks, buses, personal cars, town cars. Just in the town of Westford, that model shows that our transportation in the town produces 41% of those greenhouse gases. Next. So here's actually a little bit of a breakdown of that greenhouse gas inventory. Passenger vehicles, about 38% of that, and this is 2017 that we're going by taking data from. Residential buildings, 29%, commercial industrial buildings, 27%, our few municipal buildings, 2.4%, our solid waste, we burn all our trash here in Westford, so we do have greenhouse gas emissions from that, even though they don't, that's over in Haverhill, I think. Andover. And you also have the gas emissions of the trucks, the diesel trucks that collect that trash. Commercial vehicles about 1%, and municipal vehicles about 0.5%. So some of the things that create or that we can do to help decarbonize our world. Certainly We need to end the use, we need to transition buildings, vehicles, and other end uses away from consuming fossil fuels that create greenhouse gases. We need to aggressively pursue energy efficiency and flexibility, and this is partly where your board comes into effect, to enable cost-effective decarbonization. We need to decarbonize the energy supply. So right now, certainly some of our energy comes from burning fossil fuels. But more and more is going to be coming online from wind power. We also have other sources in the state like water power that's in the state, and others low carbon energy sources. We also need to be mindful of our trees. Our trees are one of the largest sequesters of that carbon that's and help take it out of the atmosphere, especially trees that are older trees. I think, if I recall, it's like a 50-year-old tree is a very good sequester or item that are something that sequesters carbon quite well. So certainly the less trees we cut down, the better for our climate. It is our air supply. Next. So here's some of our high priority goals for the town: to green the grid with 100% renewable energy and produce more renewable energy locally. So one of the ways that we can do that is, we have the Westford Power Options Program. I'm one of those people that signed up for the 100% renewables. It does cost a little more, but to me, it's very important to make your energy portion as green as possible. We're hoping to partner with residents, businesses, and the town departments to facilitate the installation of rooftop and parking canopy solar arrays. The more electric power that we can get from solar, the better, especially since a lot of our buildings are only used during the day. Not like this one, but certainly the rest of them, schools, for instance. Partner with Westford businesses, nonprofits, and commercial landlords to determine the percentage of renewable energy in their electric contracts, and hopefully set goals to increase those renewables. So the roadmap does have those specific goals and actions for the, as they say, the town leadership, climate advocates, residents, and businesses. So what can we do with our buildings? We need to significantly improve energy efficiency in our existing buildings. So for instance, I used Mass Save. I've got the most insulation that I can have in my attic, and I put double pane windows in, but not everybody can do that, but I put double pane windows in, so that's significantly increased the energy use of the dwelling that I live in. So we need to electrify our heating and cooling systems and appliances. So for instance, folks are moving to induction type stoves that do not electric ovens that do not use fossil fuels. We need to do what we can to change the building code, zoning, and other bylaws to increase efficiency and eliminate greenhouse gas emissions to the best of our ability. We need to advocate at the state level for newer building codes, and as a green community, we currently need to conform to what they call the stretch goals, which are a little better than the standard, somewhat significantly better than the standard goals, and those are being looked at now for a change. They're under a comment period, is that correct? Yes.
And we need to set clearly defined standards for new buildings and high performance upgrades, and I'll actually talk a little bit about that in the next slide. So
vehicles.
Yeah, yes. We're going to, we need to transition as much as possible to all electric vehicles. I have one. I feel that it's very effective, and it's in the end, it's just a car that just happens to be powered by a different source. Anecdotally, the price of gas goes up. Doesn't bother me. My electricity price stays the same. So we need to promote the lease or purchase of electric vehicles for residents, businesses, and towns and schools, and the town is already working on doing that. The police, for instance, at least some of their next cruisers are going to be at least hybrids, because at the moment, electric police cars don't exist to a great extent. We need to provide the electric vehicle supply equipment, EVSE, charging stations like the one outside the window that I've got my car hooked up to at the moment, in an optimal locations throughout the town. And that's being worked on by your EVSE working group, of which both of us are members.
As is Bob.
Right, as is Bob. Next. Can I get it? All right. Yes.
2 slides on the vehicles.
Oh, yeah, okay. So we really have already talked about this, but we'll move on to the next. So our priority goals and actions as opposed to natural resources. So as we know, the emissions reduction alone, just trying to get all our vehicles to not burn gasoline, are not going to get us to net zero. We have to preserve and enhance carbon sequestration, which I just mentioned. We talked about preserving as many trees as possible in our town. So, go ahead. So some of our major municipal recommendations here. So we're hoping, we would like certainly Westford to lead by example by reducing emissions from municipal buildings, by increasing the percentage of renewable energy in Westford's municipal energy contract, which, how does that work now? We know more about the current contract that the town has.
The current municipal contract does have renewables in it, and it's up for renewal in 2023, I think.
I think it's 2023, yeah.
Yep. The Westford POP,
Power Actions Program.
the Power Options Program, which does specify extra renewables, we're in the second year of that, and that contract goes through the end of 2023, and we'll be seeking to increase those percentages.
So we're looking to implement the energy management performance contract for municipal buildings. So right now, underway, and I believe almost completed, is a audit of all municipal buildings being done by a company called Amoresco. What they're going to do is recommend energy improvements for all our municipal buildings that are going to save both energy and saving the town money and reduce emissions from our municipal buildings. We're hoping that all capital requests for heating and cooling equipment for municipal buildings should include electric options. And new buildings and major renovations of existing buildings should, where possible, be fossil fuel free. We need to update our Westford policies for town-owned and operated vehicles to prioritize EV alternatives when we replace vehicles. We're working on this, to establish plans and timelines for implementing charging infrastructure for EVs. That is, if the town gets more electric vehicles, certainly they'll need more charging beyond the stations that are out here. We need to establish plans and a timeline for transition of school bus transportation for EVs, which is a bit difficult because we don't own the buses,
but electric school buses are becoming more and more a thing. They're being produced by major manufacturers now, and I think you're going to see more and more of those. There's a couple of towns in the state. In fact, I think Concord was one of the first towns to get an electric school bus that was, they got through a grant from the Volkswagen settlement money. We need to improve our land management practices to maximize carbon sequestration, if I haven't said that a couple times already, and climate resilience, and reduce our solid waste. So one of the things that we can do to help get there is take advantage of Mass Saves incentives, which got a real major overhaul in February of 2022. And one of the things I want to point out is the next to last bullet there is, so for instance, if I wanted to replace my fossil fuel burning furnace in my home right now, I can get up to a $10,000 rebate if I removed that furnace and went strictly with a heat pump. That's a rebate from Mass Save. And that is brand new. Prior to this year, replacing a gas furnace was not going to get you that much of a rebate.
Wouldn't get you any.
I'm sorry, yeah, wouldn't get you any rebate. So that's a new rule, or new law, new incentive. And anyone can certainly find out about their rebates by going to the Mass Save website, which is masssave.com. So one of the things that you may or may not know about is we're going to have a sustainability coordinator here in town that will be hired by July 2022, and that coordinator is going to be shared with Carlisle. And the way that was funded was Westford got a grant to pay for the first year of the salary for the sustainability coordinator. There are towns around us, in fact, like Chelmsford, that have had a sustainability coordinator for quite a long time. One of the most important things that a sustainability coordinator can do is concentrate on looking for grant money for sustainability, things like buying an electric school bus, or purchasing electric vehicles, or in fact, I've known towns that, like Arlington, for instance, where their sustainability coordinator has paid for his salary in the amount of, and more, by the amount of grants monies that he's brought to the town to do climate upgrades. Next slide. So how can your board help? Well, we look to asking for eco-friendly, non-toxic, and biodegradable insulation, fossil fuel-free heating, cooling, and domestic water using heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. So for instance, my water heater at home is now gas. But I've known folks that have gone to heat pump water heaters, which are electric.
Them are purchasing additional renewable energy in the version of in the option that they've signed up for.
I might also add that, speaking of people that we're going to be presenting this to, there is a virtual climate roadmap forum for the public on April 27th at 7:30 p.m. You can sign up for that presentation on the Westford Climate Action website under events. So that's when we hope the general public will.
Do you get to that through the town website?
Not that I know of. It's on westfordclimateaction.org.
Because a lot of people, they might go to the town thinking it's a town-sponsored thing. If you could get it.
Good.
That's a good idea. I don't know if it's, in fact, I looked on the events page this evening, the first page, and I did not see it there, so.
It may be on our page, but I haven't looked.
Because not everybody's going to remember.
Exactly.
Yep.
Westford Climate Action Committee.
Good point. westfordclimateaction.org.
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 You got it.
Sorry. Does this feel like a musical?
We write ads together.
Yeah.
Thank you. There are a lot of things, a lot of public education and outreach.
Yes.
I was driving down, I think it was Route 2 today, and I saw a solar farm, and it got me to think about the balances between carbon sequestration versus generating
That's on
solar
their
power.
old landfill, by the way, and it's been there for quite a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it would be nice if somebody on a town available website or something could say, if you have an acre of tree, of forest, New England forest, it can sequester this much carbon. If you have an acre of solar panel, a solar farm, it replaces this many gallons of oil or gas or whatever, which would generate this much. So is it better to have an acre of trees or an acre of solar panels? That kind of, people,
Sure.
that would be useful to people. The POP, the electric energy consortium that we're in, people look at, why should I pay for 100% of renewable? Because I give my money. We all share this global grid. How do I know that I'm getting 100% renewable? I mean, what's the check and balances are the companies, the electric companies required to demonstrate that if we have 10 people going 100%, maybe that's like 1/1000th of a percent of their electricity, but how do they demonstrate that they're actually using the increased money that they're getting to generate it from renewable sources? Because you aren't going to get, other than good people like Jerry, you're not going to get a lot of buy-in unless people know that it's not just a handout to the power companies.
I think that, and I have recorded that in terms of something that we want to make clear in the document, but as the Westford POP coordinator, I can also answer your question. The accounting, National Grid has nothing to do with the accounting. National Grid provides the pipes, if you will, that the current flows through. And I'm also 100% renewables customer, and by no means can you say that the electrons flowing to my house are from renewable sources. The ISO New England doesn't work that way. But what does work is that when power is generated from renewable sources, and those sources are identified, and those are very carefully tracked by the state, not just the utilities. But when they generate power, the accounting method is something called a renewable energy credit. 1 kilowatt of energy generated by one of these facilities generates a kilowatt of renewable energy credits. When I pay for my increased renewable energy content in mine, what my bill and what Jerry's bill, those extra dollars, do is to retire renewable energy credits. And so the system of accounting is through the renewable energy credits, so that as more people are seeking to buy renewable energy, that increases the demand for renewable energy, which can leverage the economics of building more renewable energy as compared to another gas-fired power plant. And so that's the accounting methodology, which is regulated by the state. And I will add that the state has specified that the increase in content of the class 1, the really good, renewable energies is increasing by 2 to 3% a year till it's 40% by 2040, and I fully presume that they will go beyond that. And so the mandated minimums are increasing. And the reality is that right now, I'm paying less for my 100% renewable energy supply than a standard national grid customer is for their basic energy supply. Because their rates go up and down, and the contract for Westford Power Options is locked in through 2023. And so, you know, that wasn't what drove my decision to go 100% renewable, but I don't mind it.
So it's like a little carrot.
Yeah.
I appreciate this. I think we have two special permit sections of our bylaws. One's called the conservation residential developments, and the other is flexible residential developments, and they both need overhauling. And this is something that could really be incorporated into the overhaul.
You mean open space?
Open space, yeah.
It's an open space
Sorry.
residential development, OSRD.
Yeah.
And a flexible development.
Thank you.
No problem.
Open space conservation,
Yeah,
you know.
it's, yeah.
But part of our problem is staff is overextended. And so to get this done in a timeline that makes sense, because we're close to 100% build out in our town. So why generate a new bylaw that's never going to get used? But, you know, if other committees and citizens want to flood our town manager's office and say, this is important in our budgets soon, we need to allocate funds to help with this, whether it would be, I don't think we're going to get more staff, that would be wonderful, but I don't think we're going to get it, but even to hire consultants to help out with the process. This is something I've been trying to get done for 10 years, and I would like to get it done before I resign from the committee, whenever that is. So any pressure that can be put on the town would be appreciated. And I know Jody's not going to be happy with me, but it's tough.
I would point out that the planning board recently implemented a slightly different approach, and certainly can't replace staff time. But they charged a working group to look at electric vehicle charging stations.
But again, it's citizens with input from staff, so that staff have to find the time to help. Okay. And as citizens, we're not as knowledgeable as professionals in the field. And you need the professional help to find examples, to figure out what's the best way to do it, to conduct the, I mean, we can't even get people to get on. You see the list of, we need people on these committees every month in the town manager's newsletter. How can we create another committee? And people don't have the time.
People have the time to come in and offer their opinions on a lot of things, but not to volunteer their time to fix a lot of things.
That's right.
So, couple pieces of feedback. So we did hear some feedback from, I think it was Bob last meeting, wasn't it? Was that the gentleman's name? No.
Paul.
Yes.
Paul Morse, yes.
Paul Morse. And he had given us some information regarding the state program. You talked about the stretch code that, you know, Westford is part of, and that there will be some changes to that coming at the end of the year. He did share the Acton, I think the changes to the general bylaws that they put in place.
Correct.
And so I do think that's one step. I don't know, has this been brought to the select board yet?
The select board has had
this presentation done?
2 presentations so far, but obviously, we're continuing to take their feedback.
Yeah, so one thought I would have in general would be, if it would be helpful for this board to sort of co-sponsor something for consideration at town meeting, I think we'd be happy to do that as far as amending the general bylaws, because I believe you need to do that in order to actually enforce sort of business, building code changes, right? That's what's gonna drive changes in the building code is the general bylaws, not necessarily the zoning bylaws. So some of the things you're asking of us in your list here, for example, I'm not sure it would be in our purview to require eco-friendly, non-toxic, biodegradable insulation today. If there were general bylaws that supported that, certainly we could enforce that as part of the actual permitting process, right? So, I think as a first step, we would be happy to, I'm actually I'm like through the assessment. I've had the assessor at my house, but I'll be installing a solar array and system at my house. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Hopefully
You'll
this
love
summer.
your $0 electric bills.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm also in the market for my first electric vehicle, so that's actually the really exciting part.
Heat pumps?
What's that?
Heat pumps?
I have looked at it. I'm not quite there yet. Let me get the solar in first. I mean,
When did you replace your furnace, right?
well, the furnace is new with the house, and the house is not that old. So,
Yeah.
so I'm, baby steps. But so I think sponsoring, working with you guys and the select board, and then the general bylaws, which would drive changes to building codes, which we could then enforce. I think that's something we'd be happy to support. It did strike me when you talked about making our buildings more energy efficient. I sit on the Community Preservation Committee, as well as this board, and it strikes me that sometimes our desire to keep the town looking historic is in direct opposition to making the town more energy efficient. So when we talk about spending taxpayer money to replace the windows in the library, or replace the windows in the old schoolhouse down in Parker Village, or whatever, they always want to do those things with materials that are period appropriate. Unfortunately, those are not particularly energy efficient solutions. Now, I'm sure the windows that they would put in, the single pane windows, would be more energy efficient than they would have been tens, dozens, or hundreds of years ago. But it's not the same as putting in triple pane, highly energy efficient windows. And I think we should consider that, whether or not town character trumps sustainability. Because I think right now, when we take certain actions at that community preservation level, at least, we're trying to preserve historic character more so than we are thinking about the building as it has an impact to the environment. The other thing I was going to say, orienting buildings, I think that that's something we could start doing now when we're looking at subdivision plans and encouraging builders to at least position roof lines. I mean, you obviously, some of these subdivisions you can imagine are in a circular pattern. You can't have every house face south, or you'd have buildings all over the place. But we could talk with developers about trying to get the roof lines such that a greater percentage of the roof is facing to the south, or doing something with roof construction to encourage some amount of southern exposure roof line.
What I haven't looked closely to see if we have any regulations about ground-mounted solar. I've looked at regulations from other towns. That's something we could certainly look into, because if somebody came to the town to ask to put in ground-mounted solar, which probably is more expensive, you gotta run wires and so forth. But that's something I think we could probably, do some recommendations on in our spare time.
Well, we do have a solar bylaw.
Yeah.
There is a section in the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, I have to look at that.
And I know it's for large solar complexes, but we were also, one of our goals is to update it to include small.
I've got an example of that I found for another town. I forget which one it was that I just grabbed, which maybe I should forward it on, and you can take a look at.
And then my last thought was exactly with the EV charging working group, and I think that the major commercial projects section of the bylaw is something that we could not only consider requiring the installation of charging infrastructure, which will be absolutely critical for the further adoption, I think, of electric vehicles, but I do agree with you. Like, there's a lot of commercial rooftops that don't have solar on them in this town, and I think it would behoove us to think about, all that real estate that's just roof lines, and that means, schools, the Cornerstone Plaza that comes immediately to mind, but a lot of the areas on 110, how can we encourage the right behavior in those landlords to put arrays on their roof to offset the power needs in that not only in that, I guess that shopping center, but to also then backfeed the grid with more, renewable and sustainable energy.
Right. Yeah, it is nice. You'll enjoy the fact that, any power you don't use from your solar roof goes right to the grid.
Yeah, but those are things that this board could consider as a change to major commercial project section of the zoning bylaw, if we wanted, if as time permits and staff has time, we could think about those things.
If it's allowed.
Right.
you
Well,
know.
obviously we'd have to pass it all past legal, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not in our purview, then.
Right.
The,
Building code.
the energy audit that's happening, will also, give, information on putting solar on existing municipal buildings, so I think we'll see some, interesting things coming out of that. As to what can be saved, because they'll actually give you the data on, you put this many panels on, it'll save this much money.
Yeah.
So,
That's part of their report.
right, that's part of their report.
Then you have to look at the structure.
Sure.
The weight.
Exactly.
And all
Absolutely,
that
of course,
stuff.
yeah.
I know in my house, nothing had to be done to put the panels on it. Happily, the structure was there,
Yeah, same.
so.
But, I mean, I can think of at least a couple of roofs that have been replaced in my time in town on fairly large buildings, be it a school or otherwise. And,
Abbott School, for instance.
Yep.
That one came immediately to mind. And, and I think it's a missed opportunity if you're
Yep.
replacing a roof anyway to not say, hey, for incrementally more dollars, we could install solar that would offset
Yep.
all or most of the power needed by the building
Yeah.
itself, right? So I think those are opportunities for the town to look at any time we're talking about a roof replacement on a town building. We should be having that conversation.
Blanchard is up for a roof replacement, and we're working on that.
Yeah.
I'm on
And the
So-
new fire station,
Right.
we're looking at.
Yeah.
And there are others, and Amoresco has done a very thorough job, and
I do agree with you. I mean, I was surprised at how affordable it actually is at this point to consider solar on the house. Like, this is not, people probably think of it as, it's this stretch goal, and I don't have nearly enough. And it's the pricing has come way down.
Agreed. Because of the SREC 2 energy credits that I get, I think my system's been on about 4 years. It's paid for. And between the tax credits and the state rebate
and the power you don't have to pay for.
and the power I don't have to pay for,
Yeah.
it's paid for.
Yeah. My spreadsheet tells me my payback period will be about 5 to 6 years, assuming I get the electric
Done
vehicle.
your
So,
homework.
so it's not bad. All right.
All right, well,
Well,
thanks
so
for your comments.
you definitely have, I think, sympathetic and open ears on the board.
Appreciate
So
that.
we're happy to partner in any way and help you drive this forward. It's important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Any comment?
Please.
I agree with what you're doing.
Thank you.
I built my house 35 years ago. Passive solar, basis cell. Sturbridge Village was my model for the front of the house. So you have the preservation aspect on the front, solar panels in the back, central mass to cut the heat.
Yeah.
So it's passive solar.
That works too, yeah.
Yeah.
It's something
All
that
electric,
people
all
have
electric.
used for years, I guess.
2x6 walls back in '87. So
Yeah.
insulation works.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Great. All right.
Thank you,
Well,
guys.
thank you very much for the
Thanks.
presentation and
Thank
for
you for your
all the
time.
work you're putting in. Okay. Well, I believe we covered our minutes and we
Everything.
covered correspondence. So I believe all that remains is a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move we adjourn. Bob, you
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
And I say aye. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.